to webinar.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon if you happen to be joining us from a time zone that's later in the day from where we are in Florida. I am Carolyn Logue, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this month's webinar hosted by the Florida Photonics Cluster. The Florida Photonics Cluster is a 30-year-old industry organization built on the extraordinary and continually growing cluster of industry, academia, and government organizations, particularly in Central Florida, but all across Florida, engaged in research and development, application, and commercialization of optics and photonics and lasers. Our goal with these webinars is to give you information that you may not have, to inform you about growth markets within optics and photonics, where there may be business opportunities for you and your company, and also to raise the awareness overall of how fundamental optics and photonics and lasers are to absolutely every other industry that we all are engaged in. Today, our focus is biophotonics, as you know. And we're going to have some interesting discussion today with our three guest speakers. And joining me and peppering them with some questions and some dialogue is Ty Olmsted, who is the Vice President for Engineering of Ocean Optics. He is also the chair of the board of the Florida Photonics Cluster. So Ty, if you'd like to introduce yourself for a minute.
Okay, I'm Ty Olmsted. Like Carolyn said, I'm the chairman for the Florida Photonics Cluster. I currently serve as vice president of research and development at Ocean Optics. At Ocean, I've been involved with biophotonics from the standpoint of we did a project for Cincinnati Children's Hospital for the NICU to look at basically using environmental information to help babies recover from jaundice early on inside. We've also worked in the area of drug discovery, working with a company called Malvern Analytical, putting in this optical system so we could interrogate pharmaceuticals as they're first being fabricated to determine what happened, what are the concentrations in those, and do they have the right number of active ingredients versus buffer. In addition to that, I've worked at companies like Lensar in refractive laser cataract surgery, Alcon for just straight refractive surgery, and also in diagnostic systems like a wavefront sensor to measure the aberrations of the eye. That's been over the last 25 years.
Yeah. So you've heard Ty mention several areas of application of photonics in the biomedical field. And we'll have some discussion today about just what is biophotonics and where are some of the growth trends. But if you think about yourself as a consumer of healthcare, there are things that we all want that really are underpinning to a great degree the extraordinary growth in this market, which is projected to double from nearly $70 billion to 120 or so billion dollars in just a few years, depending on whose market research report you read. But I don't know about you, but I want less invasive therapy. I want real-time monitoring. I want better imaging. I want better diagnostics and precision personal diagnostics, which we have all heard about personal medicine and moving toward that. And that really requires these continued advances in the integration of photonics and biomedical, along with the integration of artificial intelligence and machine language learning. So we'll hear a little bit about all that today and more. So Ty, let's introduce our speakers, and we're going to start with Dr. Mitra, who is a biomedical engineering professor at Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne. He's a member of the cluster board. Kunal.
Hey, thank you, Carol. And again, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a professor in biomedical engineering, and my research has been, starting from my PhD dissertation area, has been use of lights for diagnostics and therapy. And one of the things I did was using short pulse lasers. And everybody has been using lasers, but what we looked into it that when you're looking at short, ultra short means femtosecond lasers like 10 to the power minus 15th of a second, or a picosecond, which is 10 to the power minus 12th of a second. Those advantages were that it brings, you can focus the beam to a narrow area and cause less heat spread to the surrounding area. For example, if you're using for therapeutic applications, you can sort of, focus it and get, and also with the short pulses for imaging, get higher resolution. So we looked into, the research of developing the experiments and models. That was the initial part. And then over the course of the years, I have been sort of as a faculty. Like 3 years ago, I started actually developing this biophotonics class. And that was a very interesting thing because I felt that, we have been teaching the students how do we teach biophotonics is actually a challenge. That's one of the reasons maybe this industry, people can help us to shape. Because I've seen lectures where people will take the, as you all know, the building block of electromagnetic wave theory, right? When you talk of light. So people will spend the whole semester, how can you solve the Boltzmann's equation and get solutions? That's great. But my vision of the biophotonics is to use maybe that as fraction of it. What applications, in real life, you can use biophotonics, starting from, for diagnostics, therapy, and imaging. So that's sort of the, the flavor I bring. I have 3, 4 slides, but I let the other speakers maybe first, introduce, and then maybe during the course of what is biophotonics and stuff, I'll sort of jump in. And again, thank you, for bringing me on board.
You're muted, Caroline.
Good. Unmute myself. Right. So now we're going to move to Hugh Garvey, who is the Director of Spectral Devices at Torrent Photonics. Love that title. And Torrent is a longtime member of the Photonics cluster as well. So thank you for joining us today, Hugh.
Well, thanks very much for having me, and thanks for setting this all up. Trying to find the right. Here we go. Is that working?
And there it is. Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So just a few slides here to introduce Torrent, and we're a vertically integrated manufacturer based in the US. So there's not too many of us floating around. We operate in a wide range of application areas, and we can basically make anything from a simple optic, a lens, or a prism, all the way up to a complex assembly, and mostly do that in-house. We have a range of facilities here in Florida and around the country, and in fact worldwide, to help us do that. And we operate in a wide range of markets and application areas, including, of course, biophotonics. So my job here at Torrent is to look after the Spectral Devices division. And basically that boils down to anything that has an image sensor in there. And so we do a wide range of things ourselves, from removing the cover glass on an image sensor all the way up to building a complete electro-optical system, like a spectrometer or a camera of some sort, which is for a specific application.
Thank you, Hugh. And our third guest joining us today, which I was very excited about, is Mr. Doug Farmer, who is the editor of Biophotonics magazine or journal, as well as a few other publications for Laurel Media. So, Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm, like Caroline said, I'm Douglas Farmer. I'm editor of Biophotonics magazine. Let me see here. Okay. Excuse me. I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, in any event, I'm editor of Biophotonics, published by Photonics Media, which is a B2B magazine with nearly 30,000 readers that covers academic research and industrial development. Our content is centered around umbrella technologies such as microscopy, spectroscopy, imaging, and lasers. With specific, our news content in the magazine, and I should also say in our digital and virtual products, is focused on specific instrumentation and applications within biomedicine and the life sciences. Yeah, thank you for pulling that up.
Yeah, no. So I wanted to bring this up. It's important. One of the publications I get that I read cover to cover every time.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have sort of a pretty in-depth audience profile, but I can just add that some of the key points they're interested in terms of are optical components, sensors and detectors, cameras, and our readership is heavily concentrated in fields such as lasers and laser systems, image analysis and processing, and biotechnology. I've been editor for the last 7 years, and I think it's safe to say that in that time, the field has expanded quite a bit and grown into areas that probably weren't considered possible even a decade ago. So
could you expand on that a little bit, Doug? Yeah, when you say grown into new areas.
Well, I mean, in terms, everybody's fighting for more specificity, right, and more sensitivity, and you know, and into, you know, we can get into it a little bit more later, but I mean, obviously, things like, well, it was already mentioned a little bit in terms of point of care diagnostics, you know, and you know, applications that are working in the field as opposed to in sort of the static, sterile environment of a laboratory.
That really is reflective of the first question that we wanted to ask the three of you, because each of you bring a somewhat different perspective, because you sit at a different angle looking at this. And you know, biophotonics is a very kind of general big word. So I'm just curious, what someone comes up to you and says, what the heck is biophotonics? Curious how each of you would answer that and how you might explain that. Kunal, I know you deal with that with your students, right?
Yes. So, okay. So here maybe I'll just share just a couple of screen, because, you know, when I try to advertise for a class, I want a bigger audience, right? So, I mean, I'm in biomedical engineering, but to be honest with you, biomedical engineering is such a diverse as a field, which brings in a knowledge from various disciplines that I can recruit sometimes from maybe other, based on my application, some other major students actually can be a better fit sometimes for my research than just the biomedical engineering by itself. So I bring this slide to motivate every major. If you're a biology major, you know, I'll be probing cells. Yes, maybe you don't have much engineering background, but you can bring me the expertise on, you know, looking at, you know, the resolution. If you look at microscopy, how do you know, what are the resolution levels and stuff? So you can do that. If you're chemistry, you know, bonds, you know, you have to break, if you're doing lasers, you have to break some chemical bonds to generate, you know, do the ablation of materials and tissues. So they can, physicists, of course, they will build the lasers for us. And then biotechnology people, and of course the engineers, and then the medicine people for the clinical side. So I bring this slide to attract, you know, different majors to my class. And I've been very successful that of course, you know, I get maybe 50%, 60% engineers, but I do get basic science, you know, students based on, you know, like interest to take my class. So I try to explain to me this biophotonics. Yes, the word bio is there, but brings on what angle you're interested in. You know, are you going to be more of the hardware side, or you want to be the application side? You know, each of it, as you know, has a role to play. So bring in and I have a term paper on the class, and build your passion, build on that. So So that's sort of the mission I look into it. And then, we all know that for the biophotonics, when we teach in the academics, we say there are, three focus areas, which is diagnostics, therapy, and imaging. And each has its own, uniqueness and strength based on the, diagnosis. Of course, the point of care, which we all touched about, is the most critical. In fact, if you think of the recent astronaut Mike Finch, who came back, and he said the ultrasound sort of saved his initial diagnosis, but I want to bring optical device in space, because that's sort of be the goal, if you can bring that. So because optical devices can be relatively inexpensive, and no ionizing radiation for space, I feel that you cannot bring an MRI to space for sure. So there are, for example, for space, that's one of my research angle. I think we can bring a lot biophotonics technology. The therapy already exists. I know that, for example, Ty, he has worked in the laser cataract. That's a huge area of femtosecond lasers, which has been used. So therapeutic, wound healing, for military, they will be interested, in pain management. And people have actually done some solicitations in the past, and they've developed some portable, light therapy modules, for injured soldiers in the battlefield. So it's a huge area. And then the imaging devices, like, optical coherence tomography, for example, is a very hot, field right now. People are making, different devices, big improvements to the systems, because it can have a very easy, portable system that can be like a first line of screening before you do more biopsy and stuff like that. So there's a lot in the optical field in which going on. And this is like an academic slide. Why, we have to teach biophotonics. Somebody have to understand the science, because when light interacts with tissues, it suffers the fundamental phenomenon of scattering, reflection, transmission, absorption. And you have to understand the very basics of it for analyzing the propagation of light through tissues. So that's the reason some part of it, as I said, the modeling, maybe couple of weeks is required, so that you understand the mechanistic part of it. And so that's the reason is we have introductory effects. And then when you're looking at therapeutic effects, as you know, that it can be brought in different ways. You can sort of ablate a tissue, for example, with heat, or you can do some, photodynamic effects or breaking of chemical bonds. So you need to understand, for example, therapeutic side of it, what mechanisms are you sort of removing a tissue. So that sort of, is important. Of course, end of the day, a lot is going to depend on the physical and chemical structure of the biomaterial. And this one slide I show for, for fans, like a science fiction. This is called laser tweezer and scissors. For example, you can actually held a cell with, optically using laser scissors and tweezer, and then you can manipulate a gene. You can replace a gene and put another new, like a defective gene, using a laser scissors, and put back again the right gene. So you can do it's like science fiction, but people have tried in the lab, using laser scissors and tweezers, and they're based on optical principles. Basically, you focus a beam, and the beam literally acts like what you can hold a beam and focus at a particular point, so that you can hold two objects between the two beams. That's, as the name suggests, laser scissors and tweezers. These are like, the names literally what you use it for. And, optics is always being rewarded. For example, in 2023, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was, given for quantum dots. And, the quantum dots is a huge technology advancement, which can advance, optics, field, solar cell imaging, and quantum computing. So, and again, in order to, what they did, they basically used light to activate, this quantum dot. So to me, biophotonics in terms of, academics has got a lot of applications, but what we really need to do is to work with industry to see what applications we can develop, so that, we can, like Ty mentioned, the Nike applications. We are looking to application development, which can take us to the next step. So that's sort of teach us the fundamentals and then focus on applications. That will be my vision.
Thank you. I love that you shared and clarified that how this field it's such a blended world of so many disciplines, which is pretty typical of so much of the world of optics and photonics and lasers. And I love how you illustrated that, and that you mentioned tanning and the lights for seasonal disorder treatment, which have all been around a long time, but like so many things in our everyday life, we don't realize, or many don't realize it. That's the use of light in some way. It is optics and photonics. So I love that. And you were talking about as a professor and teaching your students, helping them think about what are real world applications? Why does this work I'm doing? Why does this topic I'm studying? Why does it matter in terms of making a real difference? So Hugh, that leads right to you
Yeah.
as an industry representative. And uh, why is Torrent and Biophotonics, and what is, what does that really mean for y'all in terms of applications that you're working on? So,
Well, I mean, the question is, why do we need biophotonics at all?
at all? Yeah,
I
good.
think,
Yeah.
and it's because photonics itself is such a vast world of possible applications and types of equipment that we have to kind of narrow it down a little
Hmm.
to try and focus in on a particular area. And I
Hmm.
guess when I think of biophotonics, it's photonics related to the human body in general.
Mm.
Although you could stretch it a little and say it's other types of biology, but that's kind of generally the way we think about things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, in our case, we're not kind of forging the frontiers like they are over at the university there, but
Hmm.
people bring to us the the thoughts that they've developed and crystallized into things that they'd like to turn into reality. That's when they come to see
Okay.
us,
Okay.
and quite often their um, their knowledge is extensive, but concentrated in the application and not necessarily how to get there. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we have to try and guide them through that process of
Hmm.
what do we need to do to actually bring this to reality and turn it into something that can be used in the real world and and make the world a better place.
So are you seeing certain trends in terms of the applications that your customers are bringing to you, given the
Um,
many
there's
applications?
there's a wide range of things, but at the basis of many types of applications is spectroscopy. So it could
Mm-hmm.
be as simple as so a prism to disperse light, to a
Mm-hmm.
more complex thing like a spectrometer,
Mm-hmm.
or more often than these days, quite often we're seeing multispectral demands where very
Mm-hmm.
specific parts of the spectrum will be used to affect a very specific application. So you want to
Ah,
pick out
okay.
particular parts of the
Yeah.
spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
and they will give you a unique footprint or
Mm-hmm.
fingerprint
Mm-hmm.
for whatever it is that you're trying to discern.
Mm-hmm. Based on the type of tissue, perhaps, the
Hmm.
type of cellular.
Yeah, it could be used to identify something very
Mm-hmm.
specifically,
Mm-hmm.
or enhance the detection of something.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Which kind of leads to we do have a question from one of our participants. Do you believe point of care diagnostics can be significantly improved through newer devices? And can you suggest some examples of disease diagnostics and methods that can replace routine diagnostics? So, and does this lead to where some of that diagnostics might be done actually in the physician's office or more in-home testing, which I think there definitely has been a push toward that. But is it happening, I guess, from what you're seeing? And Doug, this is one you can certainly weigh in on too here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I was going to talk about was
Mm-hmm.
the, Kunal had touched a little bit on light therapy, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think one example that comes to my mind, which I was going to mention to some extent in any case, was the use of um, imaging devices for an example would be dermatology, using
Mm-hmm.
a variety of multimodal imaging to examine different discoloration, different lesions, things like that,
Okay.
um, uh, to and also I should say adding the element of, and I know this is sort of a buzzword, it probably turns some people off, but the use of AI to
Mm-hmm.
integrate images from a number of different resources to
Mm-hmm.
I
sort of
think it's probably one of the good uses of AI, Doug.
right, yeah, exactly,
Exactly. Yeah.
examine the um, similarities in various
Mm-hmm.
skin conditions, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of having that differentiation between what may be a fairly benign situation and might be, the development of a tumor. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
there are another obvious example, of course, would be, ophthalmology and you know, uh, ways to uh, through OCT or whatever imaging method happens to be to um, analyze what's happening in the eye in various
Oh, yeah.
deformations and
Yeah.
so yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's kind of expanding in a number of different areas, but
Mm-hmm.
like you said, there certainly are some that need some more work, and that's what's exciting to see as people diving
Mm-hmm.
into those areas.
Yeah. And we knew we were going to bring up get to AI here because I think we've all seen there's been a lot of news around, particularly where I've seen it is the implementation of AI in reading X-rays, radiological, those kinds of imaging, and the speed and the accuracy to enhance what the physician thinks they're seeing, or to verify for him or her, what they're seeing, and that's just going to continue, I'm sure, in the diagnostics area. So, Doug, from your really unique viewpoint here as a editor of a international publication, really, you see kind of what's going on in overall across around the globe, really. And what what would you say, or in terms of the state of the industry, are you, and let's maybe talk about geographically. We know there's a lot going on in the US, um, a lot going on in Asia, a lot going on in Europe, but where are you seeing different concentrations of work and research and development in different parts of the world, or we just talk to us a little bit in general about what the distribution is, I guess, if you will, or what you're seeing in general.
Well, I don't necessarily want to lend bias to the conversation, but
That's a good.
there are various like the Florida Photonics cluster. I mean, there are
Hmm.
various clusters of activity.
Hmm.
In certainly there's activity there is activity in China. There's an activity
Hmm.
in Germany. There's activity in France.
Hmm.
Um, in the U.S., there's a lot of activity in certainly on the West Coast and
Yeah.
and in Texas also.
Hmm.
Certainly in Canada, there's activity
Hmm.
uh, research institutions and
Hmm.
companies in Ontario and places
Hmm.
like that. I think that overall, where I see some of the, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier too, but I think certainly there are systems that are capturing vast swaths of spectral data, in the visible, ultraviolet, and infrared regions of the spectrum.
Hmm.
And multimodal systems are being used to track disease progression, cellular development, things like that. And that's going to continue. I think right now, where I see some of the activity really coalescing around would be around device development at point of care, and
Mm-hmm.
field use, which means,
Mm.
basically the ability to capture robust detail in challenging conditions, whether it be,
Mm.
whether it be heat, whether it be dust, whether
Yeah.
it be weather, or obviously the challenging environment within a body or within a sample, that's
Mm-hmm.
constantly changing. And and sort of going along with the AI comments I made, the other, in parallel to that, is the issue of data storage and processing. As these
Yeah.
imaging methods get
Mm-hmm.
more and more and other photonic methods get
Mm-hmm.
more and more advanced, they're generating
Mm-hmm.
these huge amounts of data, and so the ability to break those down and separate the vital from the
Mm.
perhaps ancillary
Yeah.
elements that are being examined in diagnostics and other analysis. That those are where I see uh, things moving in biophotonics.
Excellent. And Hugh, you mentioned that, I mean, y'all have Torrent has an international footprint. You have facilities overseas as well. So,
Mhm.
uh, in the area of biophotonics, is there work going on in all of your facilities globally with companies in various areas? Or,
Well, all the manufacturing is done in the US, for at a system level at least.
okay.
Where there's component manufacturer. It's not really. Um, I don't think we have much direct contact with potential customers overseas
Okay.
necessarily, except through our UK operation, which is purely a marketing one.
Okay.
But I'd just like to camp on to what Doug was just saying there about AI. I think one of the challenges is when you collect information, it can be a vast amount of data, but I think you can end up collecting too much data because you have to collect it all and sift through it.
Mm.
Whereas I
Mm.
think one of the areas that AI can help us is to guide the actual collection of data so that you're actually looking for and honing in on the type of data that needs to be collected, and so that you
Mhm.
can then reduce the data set to a much clearer and more concise
Interesting. Yeah.
um, fingerprint of what you're looking for.
Mhm. At Torrent, are you integrating AI into the
We're
devices
working
that
on
you're?
that for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a number of products which, as some of them are meant to be kind of stepping stones towards a more. Most of our work is customized, but we do have some
Mhm.
off-the-shelf things like which are designed to be able to collect spectral information
Mhm.
throughout the normal UV and through visible to near infrared,
Mm.
so that you can then kind of work out what is the right set of data, spectrally, for your
Mhm.
application. But I think that's where we think AI can help us, and we're
Okay.
working on integrating that into those sort of products.
So, Ty, you chime in here. What are you seeing in this area of AI integration? And I'm
Um,
fascinated by what you just shared.
I think AI has a real potential in supporting and helping people work quicker through the space, just from a data analysis standpoint.
Hmm.
But you have to check your sources. I do think that as far as going to device level, there's going to be some challenges as far as getting approvals for using with the data sets and showing that your model actually works appropriately in that space.
Mhm.
But I do think that you can do it.
Mhm.
But it's just there's AI is moving so fast right now. It's really hard to set the upper limit of what it's going to do.
Mhm. Well,
I
that's a perfect lead in into the next question we were going to focus on, which key trends and priorities in research and development, technical barriers to moving forward and some of the market applications. So you've started to touch on that.
So, okay. I think key barriers, like in a lot of photonics, is how much data do you need, and does it make sense to do that device? I think a lot of times we have really good ideas about things that we can do that are cool, but you actually have to go into the reality side of it and ensure that it's worth the expense. So if you have a system that costs 20 times what it currently costs to do it in the clinic, they'll never translate. And I think that's where a lot of us get lost sometimes in our processing and our thinking. And one of the questions I would have for you, Doug, and Mel, sorry, is the how do you look at things when people come to you to talk about these devices and understand, is it worth the investment? And is it worth translating it from the laboratory into the clinic? And what your thoughts are, what you would look for, and what are the steps that you would guide people with as they're thinking about it?
It is a difficult problem actually, because as you know, anybody here would, I'm sure, agree. There's a lot more ideas than there are, you know, resources to fund and turn them all into products. And at the end of the day, will any of them, you know, all of us are here to keep our food on the table, right? So they have to be profitable at the end of the day. And you have to use your best judgment, of course, as to which ones are worth working on. I think one of the or two of the things that we kind of look at earlier on are what sort of expectations the customer has, and what sort of specifications are involved. So, you know, if the specifications are just unrealistically unattainable, then that's a bit of a red flag straight away. But on the other hand, you know, I always say to people, if it was easy, everybody else would do it. And so you're kind of looking for that fine balance between what is something that we could stretch to do, against something that just is not realistic. And then you know, what are your customers? What's he thinking in terms of what this thing needs to be able to do versus what it actually could do, as well as what are these market expectations? Are they realistic? You know, quite often customers, you know, they say, what is a million patients with this problem, but how many of them are addressable? And so we're not really the experts in that, but we have to make our best judgment as to how realistic the information is, so that we can advance the work with some of these people. And you know, it's really interesting working on these things where you are pushing boundaries, and ultimately, if you can make it work, then somebody's going to get better, and that's always a nice goal to have, and when you're working on any kind of hardware.
You ever push customers to look at resources external, like PubMed, to really try to understand what their market is?
We do. We don't. I mean, we don't do that sort of research ourselves in general, other than in a peripheral way. So, yeah, I mean, we would want to know they've looked into it at some kind of reasonable level to make it worthwhile. The resources are always limited. Doesn't matter how many you've got, so you have to use them as wisely as you can.
I'll ask one more question, then I'll back off a little bit. When you first engage a customer, how do you set their timeline expectations of actually going to market? Everybody thinks they can go to market in a day. And how do you?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is one of our market advantages, is that because we have so many resources under one roof, or at least one communal roof, we can do a lot of the stuff in-house. So that's one of the reasons people might come to us in the first place, is that we can get from A to B in a relatively short period. It's always going to be longer than customer would hope, no doubt. And especially getting a medical device to market is a big stepping stone. Normally, though, that is not really our problem. Our problem is to support them with the right hardware and for them to get over the regulatory hurdles. But getting to the right hardware is normally something that we can do in a fairly expedient fashion because of the resources we have available to us in-house.
Do any of you have a sense of the regulatory environment? And we all know that in many industries, but particularly the biomedical life sciences industry, that regulatory path is very long, it's very expensive, and is often one of the big barriers. So are you seeing is the FDA and those that are responsible for that regulatory pathway, are they beginning to really get a better grasp of the application of AI in some of these devices like this? I mean, biophotonics itself has been around a long time in some form or fashion, but integrating AI into it and making clinical decisions and diagnostics decisions based on the results. Anybody have any perspective into that?
I can chime in. Sorry, go ahead.
I've talked a lot. You go ahead.
No. I mean, I want to just chime in about the AI part. See that AI is the part. The main thing, the challenge in AI is the data sets, because I can do some predictions, but do the validation part. So you use 80 or 90% of your data set to do a validation, right? And they use 10% to make the new predictions. But the challenge is that whoever is collecting the data, me as an individual, unless it is a public repository, for example, for the biomedical field, like Beth Israel, I know, puts some repository data which you can use for physiological monitoring, which we use to get it. So what will be the channel for general people? Even I know if somebody's getting a lot of research done to get clinical data, will this data repository be easily available for people to use this for data validation? Because to me, that is the biggest challenge, because AI can predict anything, but it needs validation first. And for the validation, you need to go to repositories. Will this repository, because anytime you write a proposal, for example, NSF, I just submitted one to, anybody, they ask you one question, data management. As you know, for NSF, NIH, military, they have a form now, data management. We all write, hey, we'll put this repository for public and stuff. But if you ask anybody, hey, where is the data, you will not find anything. I have a feeling there has to be a much more bigger effort of, for example, even whatever is funded. I know the federal industry, university funding is much less compared to what the private funders are, but there has to be a way that the repositories has to be accessible to people for data validation. To me, without that, AI will not be successful, because the first step is validation. And we need to have a solid foundation of a data validation tools available to make AI powerful for prediction. That's sort of my personal experience, what we go through as we, look for solutions.
Kunal, with systems being very different in their implementation, like you have one system with a field of view of a camera that's like 100 by 100 millimeters, another one that's 50 by 50. How would you address that? And I'm putting that's a simple thing, but if you have a system that's using spectroscopy versus using spectroscopy imaging and some other feedback systems on it for your model, how would you see that positioning in a public domain? Because the next person might not use all those same parameters.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking not more a system level thing. I was thinking maybe, the prediction model, for example, heart rate, SpO2, for the military, for example. If, so then whatever device you use, you take the device and do the prediction, but you have a database of, if your heart rate, say, falls below this, or if SpO2 levels fall this should be the prediction. So yes, you're right. I mean, there are multiple angles. I'm looking at the angle more, even I invent my device, I have some solid data to say, okay, for example, if you can make saying, if your SpO2 falls below 90%, you are clinically challenged. Even those type of validation will need some data. Yes, you are right. It will be very difficult. That's another challenge. Like with every system being different, what data I collect may not be available, useful to anybody else. Yes, that's a bigger challenge. I was more thinking maybe even baseline data, whatever device you use. Okay, you have this data to at least validate your system. But you are absolutely right. I mean, system-wise data will be a big challenge, I think.
The other question I would have is companies being commercial, if they have to share their secret sauce of what their data looks like,
Exactly.
Put them at a disadvantage, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's what I mentioned, like, as I said, even in academics, we all write share. Everybody writes in the proposal. When I read in a panel, everybody says data will be shared. But if I Google it, I only find maybe a handful that we can do. So even the funding level of the federal level, they don't really implement that. They don't even check. Everybody said we're going to develop a website which will be hosted on the university domain and everything will be available. But you tell me, you go and see. So I think so there is no streamlined process right now to even have access to even funded research.
Funded research.
I mean, there are some, I'm not saying nothing, but not what you would expect to be available. That's sort of my take on that.
Really, yeah, especially given as fast as everything's moving too. I mean, the publishing cycle is not keeping up with
But Ty is absolutely right. Is this giving away the secret is a trade-off. And I think that will be a barrier for AI, in my opinion, having good data for validation.
So, Doug, I think I've seen some articles in Biophotonics that deal with regulatory barriers and patent strategies and all this kind of thing. And so, what are you seeing in terms of this whole regulatory pathway? And is that, from your perspective, is that one of the key barriers to market application?
Well, the short answer is yes, but I don't. I see it. I think I'm going to sort of back into the answer here a little bit. I don't.
Yeah.
It isn't. I don't necessarily think there's anybody that specifically doesn't want devices to come to market, but I think it's sort of it's a dilemma where there isn't enough shared to make the process smooth. So one of the things I was going to mention was that issues of calibration and standardization. And this weighs a little bit into what Kunal and Hugh were talking about as well, I think, because we have every edition, we have a bio-opinion column about various challenges where they like to see more attention given by various sectors of the industry. And one of the things that comes up is, you think of something like Raman spectroscopy, right? If you go to a trade show, a conference, there are multiple tracks about Raman spectroscopy. It's proven its value in a variety of different ways. But then the question becomes, how do you sort of segment that data? Where are the connecting points to, sort of unite the standard across a variety of different, really a number of different settings. If something's measured a certain way in the laboratory, what tolerances can be allowed in the field when you're dealing with, such a faint signal. What in what ways can that be standardized to such an extent that it can be shown to have that market that we're all talking about, really. What ways can instruments be standardized to the extent that they can be easily used by a clinician, someone who isn't specifically an optical engineer. I mean, I think those are some of those come up in the process as it's moving up the chain in regulation and really in marketing, in terms of the way other industry players respond to this. I did want to mention one thing too, since I was the one who sort of opened the door on AI. I did want to say absolutely, Kunal is right. One of the things that has come up in my interactions with researchers is the significance of having real repositories of data and information, and making sure that they're constantly updated with with information as it comes. So it's not, you can't just plug an AI algorithm into something and expect to get the answers you want. It constantly has to be fed, and I think that's going to continue to be true. And for sure, the clinicians I talked to were a ways away from getting to the point where it's fully useful in all areas. I mean, there are some that are more developed than others, but
Sure.
there's more work to do. Absolutely.
Is trust in AI? Where do you see that factors in here? Because I know in other industries that I'm involved in, like national security and some other areas, that whole issue, and just even in general, that trust in AI is
Well,
a
I think
barrier in a lot
Kunal
of
already
ways.
said trust but verify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you know how to verify?
Yeah. Well,
As well.
I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's actually a tough question to answer, because there are people that I know and work with that are all in. I mean, people who ask, you know, we have somebody in particular I'm thinking on our editorial advisory board who's like, he's like 10 miles past a lot of these questions. I mean, he's looking at how AI could be used to, you know, replace traditional H&E staining and things like that. I, but I also think that on the clinical level, you know, the concern is, you know, is somebody looking at this and it's giving false positives? Is it giving people an uncertainty, a certainty that they shouldn't have, you know? And there always is that, like you said, trust but verify. There is a general sense that there needs to continue to be human involvement in
Human
these
in the loop.
interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I have a question I'd like to ask you, just because I think you'd have a right perspective. From from a biophotonics standpoint, what would have the greatest impact over the next decade if we could be solving biophotonics? Where do you see the biggest push to invest?
The most interesting things I've seen was this for Doug, or was it a general question?
Anybody can answer.
All of you. Yeah.
The most interesting things that I've seen are things which are right now quite specialized tests of some sort, maybe that you have to go to a clinic somewhere or the other. But there's prospects of having something in the doctor's office on his desk. You get the results straight away. And a lot of that is photonic based. I think that will make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you know, it's an expansive area already, but anything in the fluorescence domain, you know, whether it be, you know, in terms of biological research and fluorescence guidance surgery, which we've had, you know, some interesting articles about recently. So I think that when the challenge is always to meld something that a lot of people understand with bringing it into new areas that you know, could provide even more value than it already has.
One of our guest attendees here made a comment. I was not aware, even though I use Quest Diagnostics. They publish diagnostic insight reports regularly, and given the huge volume, you can just imagine the kind of data they have. So to that point, having new methods to improve diagnostics and sample management, sample size. I would guess that that's an example of what we're all talking about in terms of areas where there's an existing process, there's an existing technology, but that improvement or fine tuning or more precision through AI and through photonics, particularly, can make a huge difference. Gosh, we are almost at noon here. So before I wind this up, I'm going to ask each of you to share any final parting thought that maybe has come to mind or that you'd like our audience to know and keep in mind as they think about and are more aware of biophotonics and what's happening in that market. So, Kunal?
Okay, so I'm sort of recapitulating, the questions and stuff. The biggest question, in my opinion, is that end of the day, we are driven by insurance. Like, think of OCT. I look at it. Now you go to doctor's office, OCT. OCT was implemented in Europe 10 years ago, or even than before in US. They were used very extensively for ophthalmology. In US, it took way more longer time. Now I see, when you go for an annual eye exam, OCT being invested and being there, at least in major eye clinics. If I go there for annual, I see that they take the OCT images, which is great. So that's one example. I'm just saying that it is in doctor's office. It's cost, as everybody has city. I don't know. I mean, at least the office I go to is a little bit bigger, groups, so they have it. But so these are the things. I have a feeling biophotonics, a lot of technologies. The question is that, again, part of it, the insurance will they pay for it or not? Just think of it, the dental. I know that some of the research I worked, like dental drilling, they still will keep on doing mechanical drill because some of the laser-based things, they said that it's not cost-effective from them in compared to a mechanical drill. So there are some technologies available. I'm not saying too many, but some of them, how do you take it to the clinics, is also driven by regulatory and insurance challenges. So it's just not technology. It's just a whole ecosystem needs to be somehow being assessed to take it to the next step. That's sort of my thoughts.
Some of the most innovative solutions in the biomedical field that I've seen have died on the vine because inability for the insurance industry to understand the importance of it in the regulatory environment. Yeah.
Well, this is a US problem more than a global one, but
so you see a difference in
yeah, well, as
Asia
Kunal
versus
said,
Europe.
some things have been in Europe for 10 years, but they're not here, and it's primarily because of insurance issues.
Which is why many companies go to market outside the US first.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Prove that it works. Then can bring it home again. Yeah.
Or go approach the veterinary market, the animal healthcare market first, and then come into the human market. It's another strategy, I see. Yeah. So, Hugh, anything you'd like to share? Final
well, the
thoughts?
only thing I would say is that we're probably just scratching the surface.
Yes.
The possibilities are endless, and we come up with new ideas. Kunal and his group and are kind of forging the way, but there's new ideas and new ways of doing things every day, and I think that's one of the things that keeps probably most of us working in photonics. It's such an interesting field to work in because you never have the same day twice.
Yeah, very much so. And Doug.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things that come to mind, sort of forward looking on this. And I think one of the things I like about our magazine, and to be fair, the field in general, is sort of the bridge between industry and academia, right?
Yes.
So I feel like on the academic/clinical side, the issue with this ultimate success of biophotonics technologies has to do with how well it can fit into the clinical workflow. That's the first question. That is this instrument something that can be, has a footprint that can be integrated easily into instrumentation that a surgeon or a doctor has the ability to operate, and also there was something that you had said earlier that kind of caught my attention. Issues of sample preparation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how that can sometimes be a barrier to
Mm-hmm.
successful integration of a technology into a
Mm-hmm.
setting, because is it something that introduces a lot of potential error in that process.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the industry side, the thing that I kind of notice, and I I think anybody on this call probably understands this in their own work, but the because in many cases some of these devices can be developed for very specific circumstances that are interesting from a scientific standpoint, but do they engender enough interest outside of a particular area to move it along in
Good
development?
point.
So
Yeah.
there's quite a bit that happens. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Many companies this is not an aspersion on anyone in particular, but companies often want to jump on the pharmaceutical bandwagon, right? Like the pharmaceutical
Mm-hmm.
development. So because
Mm-hmm.
that's where, if you can get into that, you know, at least there will be sustained interest in what it
Mm-hmm.
is that you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that really in any industry, like
Yeah.
inspection and other areas too. But certainly when you're talking about pharmaceutical development, live cell imaging, that's of interest in that, and and a number of and from fundamental research, and certainly anything to do with cancer delineation and
Mm-hmm.
resection. I mean, those are when you can. A lot of times companies try to coalesce around these particular areas that
Mm-hmm.
have established markets in the literature.
Yeah, yeah, and may not be aware of
Yeah.
or not realize the potential for those more niche markets that are not being given the attention, but where there's
They, they,
less fewer barriers maybe because there may be less competition even so.
they may not also realize that you need to be patient if you want to address those sort of
That's
markets.
so true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, I do want to just back to the Biophotonics magazine, and if you're interested in continuing to learn about this field, which I encourage you to sign up for a subscription to Biophotonics. And they have some great webinars, both on demand as well as periodically that you can participate in. There's a great industry events calendar on here as well that talks about a lot of different activities and
Yeah.
events going on in this field internationally as well as the
I, I,
U.S.
sh- I appreciate the plug,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I want to mention too that we do have a regular podcast, All Things
Yes,
Honest podcast, that it comes online every couple weeks. So
it
that'll
was it
and there
was
are some
here somewhere.
fascinating conversations associated with that.
There
So,
it is. And it is, it is, I'm not saying this because Doug's on the line here, but this for a while, this has been one of the podcasts that I listen to regularly. We all have that small group of ones that we listen to because they're really useful and they're engaging. And this is one of them. And this one that you see here, sunlight could reduce plastic waste. So it's a fascinating one to go listen to.
Great
And then,
magazine.
pardon?
Great magazine.
It is. Yes,
thank you
yes.
very much.
Yeah. And then also certainly want to make sure that you are aware of how you can continue to stay engaged with us at the Florida Photonics Cluster, particularly whether you don't have to be in Florida to be a participant in the Florida Photonics Cluster. Actually, probably about half our members or more are not in Florida. They may have a person in Florida. Some of them don't actually, but they understand the importance of being engaged in the Florida industry sectors and in the Florida optics and photonics and lasers community because it is internationally known in so many ways. So this is our website. I encourage you to check it out. In terms of our next event, it will be an in-person networking event at one of our member companies, Edmund Optics. Edmund is a global optics and photonics company, but they have a major facility in Oldsmar, Florida, just north of Tampa. They will be hosting us on August 13th. We'll have a tour of the facility. They'll provide lunch. We're going to have a speaker from the University of South Florida talking about the work that they're doing. And a number of their faculty will be there, as well as many of our members. So we encourage you to join us for that. Follow us on social media, particularly LinkedIn. And if you are interested in telling someone about this particular webinar, or you'd like to go back and look at some of the ones that we've done in the past, we do have a YouTube channel, and you can find the link to that under resources on our website. Previous webinar was actually on photonics and semiconductors, which is another very significant growing industry, as we all know. So with that, thank you so much, Kunal, Hugh, and Doug, and Ty. Thanks for joining me to have this conversation. I learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing all of you pretty soon. So with that, we can all go backstage and go get lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be involved.
It was fun. Thanks for joining us.